Have you ever looked at the person you love and wondered why being close to them suddenly feels dangerous? Not because they became cruel overnight, not because the love disappeared, but because somewhere deep inside, your heart started treating love like something it needed to survive instead of something it could safely enjoy. Here's the unsettling part. For many couples, a marriage doesn't begin falling apart when the arguments become louder. It begins much earlier, when love quietly starts feeling unsafe. Most people imagine the end of a marriage as one dramatic moment, a final fight, a packed suitcase, divorce papers on a kitchen table. But relationship psychology paints a very different picture. Long before those visible moments, something subtle often changes beneath the surface. Two people who once found comfort in each other slowly begin reacting to one another as if they were facing a threat instead of a partner. The shift is almost invisible at first, which is exactly why it's so easy to miss. This is where attachment theory offers an incredibly helpful lens. It doesn't claim to explain every relationship, and it certainly doesn't predict everyone's future. But decades of psychological research suggest that the ways we learn to seek comfort, handle conflict, and respond to emotional closeness can continue shaping our adult relationships in surprisingly powerful ways. Imagine your emotional system as an invisible security alarm. In a healthy moment, it quietly stays in the background, allowing you to laugh, connect, disagree, and repair after conflict. But when that alarm begins detecting danger, even when no physical danger exists, it can completely change how love feels. Suddenly, a delayed text message isn't just a delayed text. It feels like rejection. A request for space doesn't sound like self-care. It feels like abandonment. A simple disagreement starts feeling like evidence that the relationship is slipping away. What's fascinating is that neither partner necessarily realizes this is happening. They often believe they're reacting to the present, when in reality their nervous system may also be responding to older emotional experiences stored beneath conscious awareness. The conversation happening on the outside sounds like it's about dishes, money, intimacy, or parenting. The conversation happening underneath is often much quieter. Am I safe with you? Can I trust you? Will you still choose me when things get difficult? For someone with a more anxious attachment pattern, emotional distance can feel unbearable. Silence becomes louder than words. A partner coming home tired may accidentally trigger fears of being unwanted. They may seek reassurance, ask more questions, or reach for greater closeness, not because they're trying to create conflict, but because their emotional system is searching for safety. Ironically, that search for reassurance can sometimes overwhelm a partner who leans more avoidant. Instead of experiencing those conversations as invitations to connect, they may experience them as pressure. Their instinct isn't necessarily to stop loving. It's to create distance so they can regulate emotions in the only way they've learned. Without realizing it, one partner moves closer while the other steps back. Both are trying to feel safe, yet each person's strategy unintentionally increases the other's fear. What makes this cycle so heartbreaking is that neither person usually wakes up intending to hurt the other. They're responding to the relationship through two completely different emotional maps. One partner interprets closeness as safety. The other interprets too much emotional intensity as something that threatens their sense of the stability. Both reactions can make perfect sense in light of their past experiences, even when they create painful misunderstandings in the present. Picture a couple sitting on opposite ends of the same couch after a long day. To an outside observer, nothing seems unusual. They're both scrolling on their phones. The room is quiet, but internally, two very different stories may be unfolding. One person is wondering, why don't they ever reach for me anymore? The other is thinking, I hope we can just have one peaceful evening without another difficult conversation. Neither thought is spoken aloud, yet those silent stories begin shaping tomorrow's interaction before tomorrow even arrives. This is one reason emotional disconnection often develops so gradually. It rarely begins with a lack of love. More often, it begins with repeated moments where each partner misunderstands what the other is truly communicating. A request for reassurance is heard as criticism. A need for personal space is heard as rejection. An attempt to solve a problem is mistaken for emotional indifference. Little by little, each interaction reinforces the belief that the other person simply doesn't understand. Psychologists sometimes describe this as a negative interaction cycle. The details vary from couple to couple, but the pattern is remarkably common. One partner protests the growing distance. The other withdraws to reduce conflict. The protest becomes stronger because the distance feels even more painful. The withdrawal becomes greater because the conflict feels increasingly overwhelming. Eventually, the pattern itself becomes the enemy, even though both people continue blaming each other. This dynamic can become especially confusing because it often hides behind ordinary, conversation. A disagreement about vacation plans may not really be about travel. An argument over household chores may carry an invisible question beneath it. Can I depend on you? Even frustration about texting habits might actually reflect a deeper concern. Do I still matter to you? When those underlying emotional needs remain unspoken, couples often spend years debating surface issues, while the real wounds quietly grow deeper. There's another attachment pattern that adds even more complexity. People with fearful-avoidant tendencies often experience two competing desires at the same time. They deeply crave closeness, yet they may also fear the vulnerability that closeness requires. They can feel safest when someone is emotionally available, then become anxious the moment intimacy actually arrives. This internal push and pull isn't a choice or a character flaw. It's often the result of earlier experiences that taught the nervous system to associate love with both comfort and pain. When two people unknowingly carry these invisible patterns into a marriage, they may begin believing the relationship itself is unsafe. But in many cases, it isn't love that's creating the fear. It's the meaning their emotional systems have learned to assign to closeness, distance, conflict, and vulnerability. And recognizing that difference may be one of the most important turning points a couple can make. Because what feels hopeless on the surface sometimes has much deeper and far more understandable roots. One of the most painful misconceptions about struggling marriages is the belief that if love feels difficult, the love must be gone. But emotions don't always tell us the whole story. Sometimes what disappears first isn't love at all. It's the feeling of emotional safety that allows love to be expressed freely. Without that sense of safety, even genuine affection can become buried beneath defensiveness, anxiety, or emotional exhaustion. Think about what happens when someone touches a bruise. The pain doesn't necessarily mean the touch itself was harmful. It means there's already a wound beneath the surface. Relationships often work the same way. A simple comment, an unanswered question, or a forgotten promise may trigger an emotional reaction that seems much bigger than the moment itself. That's because the nervous system isn't responding only to what's happening now. It's also reacting to old experiences that taught it when to expect disappointment, rejection, or emotional isolation. This is why two couples can experience the exact same situation and respond in completely different ways. Imagine both partners forget an anniversary. One couple laughs about it, orders takeout, and plans another celebration together. Another couple sees the same mistake as proof that the relationship no longer matters. The event is identical, but the emotional meaning attached to it is completely different. Attachment patterns help explain why those meanings can vary so dramatically from person to person. Over time, these repeated interpretations begin changing the way partners see each other. Instead of assuming good intentions, they start anticipating hurt. Instead of expecting comfort, they prepare for disappointment. This shift is subtle but incredibly powerful. The brain naturally looks for evidence that confirms what it already believes. So if someone begins believing, my partner doesn't care about me, they'll often notice every forgotten text or distracted conversation while overlooking the countless quiet moments that communicate care. This doesn't mean those painful feelings aren't real. They absolutely are. But psychology reminds us that our emotional reality and objective reality aren't always perfectly aligned. We can sincerely feel abandoned even when our partner is overwhelmed rather than uncaring. We can feel controlled when our partner is actually trying, awkwardly, to reconnect. Recognizing this difference isn't about dismissing emotions. It's about becoming curious enough to ask what those emotions might be trying to protect. Curiosity is something many couples lose long before they lose love. In the early stages of a relationship, people naturally ask questions. What did you mean? How are you feeling? Help me understand. As emotional wounds accumulate, those questions often turn into assumptions. Instead of wondering, we conclude. Instead of exploring, we defend. And once assumptions replace curiosity, every conversation becomes harder than it needs to be. This is also where secure attachment offers an important perspective. Securely attached people aren't individuals who never feel anxious, hurt, or disappointed. They're people who have generally learned that conflict doesn't automatically threaten the relationship. They can express needs without assuming rejection. They can hear criticism without immediately believing they're unlovable. Most importantly, they understand that emotional safety isn't created by avoiding difficult conversations. It's built through experiencing those conversations and discovering that the relationship can survive honesty, repair, and vulnerability. And that realization changes everything, because it opens the door to a possibility many struggling couples have forgotten, that feeling unsafe in love doesn't always mean the relationship is beyond healing. If there's one moment that quietly predicts the direction of a marriage, it's often the moment when one partner stops believing repair is possible. Not because they've stopped caring, but because every attempt to reconnect feels like it ends in the same painful place. They begin telling themselves, why should I try again if nothing ever changes? The tragedy is that the other partner may be asking themselves that exact same question. This is where emotional safety becomes more than just a comforting phrase. In relationship psychology, emotional safety is the experience of believing you can be honest without being punished, vulnerable without being shamed, and imperfect without constantly fearing rejection. It doesn't mean every conversation will be easy or every disagreement will end happily. It means both people gradually learn that conflict is something they face together instead of something they use against each other. Research on healthy relationships consistently suggests that successful couples aren't defined by having fewer problems. They're defined by their ability to repair after those problems occur. A sincere apology, a gentle hand reaching across the table, a willingness to say, I misunderstood you, instead of insisting on being right. These moments may seem ordinary, but they slowly retrain the relationship to feel safe again. Trust isn't usually rebuilt through one grand romantic gesture. It's rebuilt through hundreds of small experiences that quietly tell the nervous system, you're not alone anymore. Of course, not every marriage can or should continue. Some relationships involve ongoing abuse, manipulation, or patterns of harm that require distance and professional support rather than reconciliation. Attachment theory is a tool for understanding human connection, not a reason to excuse unhealthy or dangerous behavior. Recognizing your attachment patterns can increase compassion, but it should never replace healthy boundaries or personal safety. For many couples, though, the greatest breakthrough happens when they stop asking, who's causing this? And begin asking, what cycle are we trapped in? That small shift changes everything. Instead of viewing each other as the enemy, they begin recognizing that the real challenge is the pattern pulling them apart. The anxious pursuit, the protective withdrawal, the misunderstood intentions. Once the cycle becomes visible, both partners have something they can work on together instead of fighting against each other. The encouraging news is that attachment patterns aren't permanent life sentences. While our early experiences shape us, they don't have to define every future relationship. People can develop greater emotional security through self-awareness, healthy relationships, therapy, and repeated experiences of trust and repair. The brain remains remarkably adaptable throughout life. Every emotionally safe interaction creates another opportunity to rewrite expectations that may have been formed years, even decades, earlier. So if love has started feeling unsafe, don't rush to conclude that love itself has disappeared. Sometimes what's fading isn't affection. It's the confidence that your heart will be understood, protected, and accepted. And while rebuilding that confidence takes patience, honesty, and courage from both people, it's a journey many couples have successfully made. As you continue watching this series, remember the question we began with. What if the scariest part of a marriage isn't the moment it ends, but the quiet moment when love first starts feeling unsafe? Recognizing that moment may be uncomfortable, but it can also become the beginning of real change. If this conversation resonated with you, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more evidence-based relationship psychology, and watch the next video where we'll explore another hidden pattern that silently shapes the way we love and connect. Before a marriage reaches its breaking point, something else often begins to disappear so quietly that neither partner notices it at first. It's not commitment. It's not attraction. It's the feeling that your inner world is welcome in the relationship. You start editing yourself. You think twice before sharing what hurt you. You rehearse conversations in your head instead of having them out loud. Eventually, silence begins to feel safer than honesty. At first, this self-protection seems harmless. You tell yourself you're avoiding another argument. You're trying to keep the peace. But over time, the distance created by unspoken emotions becomes much larger than the conflict you were trying to avoid. Your partner doesn't know what you're carrying because you've stopped letting them see it. They notice that you've changed, but without understanding why. They may assume you're losing interest when in reality, you're protecting a heart that no longer feels safe enough to be fully seen. This emotional withdrawal can happen regardless of attachment style. Someone with anxious tendencies may stop asking for reassurance after being disappointed too. Many times, convincing themselves that needing comfort only pushes people away. An avoidantly attached partner may become even more self-reliant, believing it's easier to handle everything alone than risk feeling misunderstood. A fearful avoidant individual may desperately want connection one day and instinctively pull away the next, caught between longing and fear. Different paths, but often the same destination, increasing emotional loneliness within the relationship. One of the most overlooked truths in relationship psychology is that loneliness isn't seen, defined by being physically alone. Some of the loneliest people are sleeping beside someone they deeply love. They share a home, meals, responsibilities, and routines, yet feel emotionally invisible. Conversations become practical instead of personal. They discuss schedules, bills, errands, and obligations, but rarely talk about their fears, hopes, disappointments, or dreams. The relationship continues functioning on the outside, while quietly starving on the inside. This is why emotional safety is built through countless ordinary moments, rather than doling tavier extraordinary ones. It's in the way someone responds when their partner admits they're struggling. It's choosing curiosity instead of defensiveness. It's putting the phone down when your partner says, "Can we talk?" It's remembering that sometimes your partner isn't asking you to solve their pain. They're asking you to stay present while they experience it. These moments may seem insignificant in isolation, but together they become the emotional foundation that determines whether love feels like a refuge or a risk. Perhaps the most hopeful part of all this is recognizing that awareness changes possibilities. Once you begin seeing the invisible patterns shaping your relationship, you're no longer completely controlled by them. You can pause before reacting. You can ask a different question. You can choose connection over assumption, even if that choice feels unfamiliar at first. Healing doesn't happen because two people become perfect. It happens because they become willing to understand themselves and each other a little more deeply than they did yesterday. And sometimes that single shift is where a marriage that once felt unsafe begins finding its tapa, way back to emotional security.